He was handcuffed in public, humiliated without a single question. But the next day he walked into court in a suit and left everyone speechless. This story will shake you, move you, and open your eyes. If you believe in truth, justice, and quiet courage, make sure you watch till the end. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. It was a Monday morning in downtown Elmsworth, where sirens honking and coffee runs fused into the pulse of the city. A man named Isaiah Bell stood calmly outside a small croissant shop. One hand holding his phone, the other gripping a brown pastry bag. No rush, no threat, just waiting for his ride. But calm can be dangerous in the eyes of suspicion. A patrol car slowed without sirens, without lights. Officers Seth Rowan and Dana Keller stepped out like hunters on instinct. "Hands where I can see them," Dana barked. Isaiah turned startled, but not shaken. "I'm just waiting for my driver," he said softly, blinking in disbelief. Seth's hand hovered near his holster. "You match a suspect's description," he snapped. In less than 30 seconds, Isaiah's wrists were cuffed. The pastry bag hit the ground. No ID was asked for, no explanation offered, no glance into the receipt clearly peeking from the bag. Bystanders pulled out phones, tension rippled, but Isaiah said nothing. Because sometimes silence isn't weakness, it's the quiet before an earthquake. And today it had just begun to rumble. Isaiah was processed like countless others, booked, photographed, locked away. But there was something about his presence, something that made even the seasoned desk officer pause. "I want my phone call," Isaiah said, voice even low, deliberate. Elliot, the officer on duty, looked at the intake form. "Address, full name." His eyes narrowed, caught on a detail. Something didn't add up. "You work for?" Isaiah didn't nod. He didn't deny it. He just dialed. "This is Bell, Elmsworth PD Downtown Precinct, Madison incident. I need the full file by this afternoon." Then he hung up. No emotion, no panic, just precision. 28 seconds. That's all it took. Back in the holding cell, Isaiah sat still, wrists still bound, but his posture spoke volumes. Not rage, not desperation, just clarity. He wasn't here to plead. He was here to expose. And while Seth and Dana continued their day unfazed, laughing over paperwork and coffee, they hadn't realized yet. They hadn't arrested a suspect. They'd handcuffed the complaint itself. In the precinct lounge, Seth leaned back, sipping his coffee like the world hadn't shifted. Dana stretched her legs and laughed. To them, Isaiah was just another guy with a suit, a smug face, and a rehearsed LinkedIn bio. They always get mouthy until the cuffs are on. Dana smirked. "Probably another fake PhD and a sad story about his credentials." Seth chuckled. Neither of them checked the phone Isaiah held. Neither noticed the state-issued badge tucked quietly behind his ID. They didn't read him his rights. Didn't bother with verification. They just assumed, as they always did. But 30 miles away, in a state oversight office, an encrypted email was open. Subject priority alert, detainment of Isaiah Bell, attached clearance level federal access codes pending legislative reviews and active audit authorization. And now every decision Seth and Dana had made in that 5-minute interaction would become evidence, not for a lawsuit, for a systemic review. They had mistaken calm for powerlessness. They had no idea that this time the badge they so proudly wore was about to face one far heavier. Isaiah had been profiled before, stopped, questioned, ignored countless times. He knew the feeling of cold suspicion pressing into warm skin. But this time was different, because now he wasn't just a citizen. He was special counsel for civil integrity, appointed by the state to oversee internal law enforcement conduct. He didn't carry a badge of intimidation. He carried one of oversight, one built not on fear, but on data, statute, and relentless truth. The phone call he made didn't summon a lawyer. It launched a full-scale compliance audit on the Elmsworth precinct. Isaiah didn't want revenge. Revenge was loud, blunt, temporary. He wanted exposure. He wanted patterns printed on paper cases, reopened procedures, questioned names made public. And above all, he wanted people like Seth and Dana to feel what so many before him had: the cold steel of accountability. For too long, he'd watched misconduct get buried beneath bureaucracy. But this time, he was the shovel. And the grave wasn't his, it was theirs. 2 days later, Seth and Dana walked into city court in full uniform, badges gleaming, boots, polished confidence intact. They expected a quick hearing, a procedural dismissal. Maybe a smug lawyer defending a misunderstood citizen. What they didn't expect was for Isaiah to not be listed as a defendant. The bailiff stopped them at the doors of courtroom 3C. Rowan and Keller. Yes, Seth replied. Your witnesses, the bailiff said. This isn't a criminal case. They blinked, confused. Inside the courtroom was packed. Community leaders, journalists, activists, legal observers, and there seated calmly beside the presiding judge in a tailored dark suit was Isaiah Bell. A brass nameplate sat in front of him. Special Counsel, Civil Accountability Division, State of Elmsworth. Seth froze. Dana whispered, "What? Is this?" Isaiah didn't look their way. He didn't need to. The gavel dropped. The judge's voice rang out. Today's session concerns a procedural review regarding the detainment of Mr. Bell. He will serve in an advisory capacity with full authority granted under Article 14. In that moment, Seth and Dana weren't officers anymore. They were witnesses to their own unraveling. The courtroom was silent, but not with peace. It was the silence of a room gasping without breath. Isaiah calmly opened his binder, voice steady like a clock striking truth. I'm not here for retribution, he began. I'm here to present a pattern, one you've ignored for far too long. He laid down the first file, Julian Wade, pulled over for a broken taillight, detained for over an hour. No charges. The next, Malik Jones, wrongly stopped walking home. No apology, no report, just bruises. Seth tried to interrupt. We were following dispatch descriptions. Isaiah didn't flinch. And how often do those descriptions lead to black neighborhoods? How many times does fit the description end in cuffs and humiliation? Dana's jaw tightened. Cameras clicked quietly in the back of the room. Isaiah didn't need anger to pierce. He used clarity, logic, receipts. This wasn't a courtroom drama. It was an autopsy of indifference. And with each page he turned, Isaiah wasn't just confronting two officers. He was holding up a mirror to a system that had forgotten what justice looked like. During recess, Dana stood in the hallway, her face pale, hands shaking slightly. She wasn't used to being looked at this way, not as a protector, but as a perpetrator. I think he's embellishing, she muttered to Seth, but even she didn't believe herself. Seth didn't answer. He was staring at a legal brief, page after page of misconduct complaints filed against them over the past 2 years. Some were dismissed, some were never investigated. All were real. Dana remembered a 17-year-old she'd handcuffed for loitering outside a library. She remembered the man in a business suit asking for a supervisor and getting mocked instead. And now those moments, once forgotten, felt like they were pressing down on her chest. Isaiah hadn't raised his voice. He didn't need to. He had something heavier than accusation, truth, layered and patient, unraveling them from the inside out. And for the first time, Dana felt something far more haunting than guilt. She felt exposed, not by Isaiah, by the weight of who she had let herself become. 3 days later, the Elmsworth Police Department was hit with an official state memo. Subject Civil Review Initiated Division. Officer conduct under investigation. Attached a full audit notice. 17 case files. 4 unresolved complaints. Body cam footage pending retrieval. Isaiah hadn't gone to the press. He didn't need headlines. He used a weapon, far more surgical procedure. Seth paced the hallway outside the captain's office. Dana sat motionless on a bench staring at the wall. A week ago, they had been veterans, untouchable, respected. Now they were 2 names on a list under scrutiny, under review, under fire. I thought we were just doing our jobs, Dana whispered. Yeah, Seth replied. But maybe the job we thought we were doing was broken. Neither said it aloud, but the truth lingered in the air like smoke. They hadn't been blindsided by betrayal. They were unraveling under the weight of their own unchecked power. And Isaiah, quiet and persistent, had simply shown them where the thread began to pull loose. Isaiah stood before a new committee, a review panel assembled to oversee civil reform recommendations. But he didn't come to attack. He brought a folded letter with smudged ink and worn creases. His voice caught slightly as he began, "This is a letter from the daughter of Raymond Ellis. He died last year after being wrongfully detained. She writes, I don't want lawsuits. I just wanted someone to say my dad mattered." No one moved, not the mayor, not the police chief, not the seasoned commander sitting with arms crossed. Isaiah didn't point fingers. He didn't demand resignations. He just asked for one thing: recognition of harm, of humanity, of stories buried in silence. Strength isn't how hard you hit, he said. It's how much truth you can stand. His words didn't echo. They settled heavy and sacred. And for once, the silence that followed wasn't defensive. It was respectful. And Greg, seated near the back, closed his eyes knowing this wasn't Isaiah's victory. It was their reckoning. The next precinct-wide meeting was called on a quiet Friday afternoon. Isaiah sat off to the side, no title required, just presence. The floor opened for remarks. No one moved. Then slowly Greg, once the most respected, most hardened officer on the team, stood up. He cleared his throat, then looked around. I used to think this badge meant I had all the answers, that I had to be firm. Unshakable, untouchable, he began. But I was wrong. Silence gripped the room. Greg's voice lowered. This badge isn't a shield from accountability. It's a promise. And I forgot that. He looked straight at Isaiah. You didn't come here to tear us down. You came to remind us who we said we'd be. Isaiah didn't smile. He just nodded softly, like someone offering permission to finally let go of old armor. And that day in that room, Greg didn't just reclaim his voice. He reclaimed his purpose. And this time it didn't come from control. It came from courage. In the days that followed Greg's speech, the precinct didn't return to normal, because it couldn't. There was a silence that followed Isaiah wherever he walked. Not the cold, suspicious silence of accusation, but the heavy, reflective kind. Officers turned their eyes down, not out of shame but contemplation. Old jokes in the break room vanished. So did the smug comments when arrests were logged. Something had shifted. Isaiah wasn't just a man anymore. He was a mirror. He didn't raise his voice, but every step he took echoed louder than orders ever could. Even the newest recruits noticed. One trainee whispered to her partner, "He doesn't look like he's judging, just hoping we're better." And that was more haunting than any courtroom, because Isaiah wasn't here to punish them. He was here to wake them up. And every hallway, every roll call, every morning meeting, they all carried the weight of that quiet, unshakable question. What kind of officer am I really becoming? 2 weeks later, Dana found Isaiah in the parking lot just before dusk. The orange sky wrapped the precinct in a strange stillness. For a moment, she didn't see a special counsel or a man she once cuffed without cause. She saw a human being. I need to say something, she began, her voice dry. Isaiah didn't stop her. He just waited. I messed up. I saw a black man in a suit and assumed he was lying. I didn't ask, I didn't pause. I just followed my training, and I never questioned why it always pointed at people like you. Her throat tightened. Isaiah looked at her, eyes calm but not cold. Thank you for saying it, he said. Then he added something she didn't expect. But change isn't in the apology. It's in what you choose to do next. Dana nodded slowly, and in that moment, something lifted off her shoulders. Not guilt, but the paralysis of denial. And that made all the difference. In early spring, Isaiah was invited to lead a department-wide reform workshop, not as an outsider, but as a collaborator. Not everyone showed up, but those who did stayed. Isaiah opened with a simple question. What's the first word that comes to your mind when you hear accountability? Some said punishment, others said fairness. A few murmured fear. No one said growth. Isaiah replied, why is that? He didn't lecture, he asked. He listened. He played footage, real encounters, both just and unjust. He walked them through what could have been done differently, not with anger, with presence, and slowly the room softened. An older officer raised his hand. You ever get tired of holding the line alone? Isaiah paused. His smile was faint. Every day. But the more of you who join me, the less alone it feels. That workshop didn't end with applause. It ended with reflection. And for the first time, a seed was planted, one rooted not in rules, but in shared responsibility. 3 days later, Isaiah did something that shocked everyone he requested to ride along with Greg on patrol. No press, no cameras, he said, just the road. And your reality. Greg was hesitant, but agreed. They drove in silence, at first the city lights washing over their windshield. Then Greg broke it. Do you believe I'm capable of change? Isaiah glanced out the window. I wouldn't be here if I didn't. They pulled into a local park where a young man stood nervously beside his car. Expired tags, Greg muttered, but instead of stepping out immediately, he paused. What do you think, he asked Isaiah. Talk to him like you're his future, not his judge. Greg nodded, stepped out, and approached with a different posture, not one of dominance, but conversation. 10 minutes later, no citation, just a warning and a genuine thank you. Back in the car, Greg exhaled. That felt better. Isaiah smiled, because it was. Back at the state capitol, a motion landed on the governor's desk, the Isaiah Bell Reform Initiative, a statewide mandate for bias training civilian review panels and a revised code of conduct built on the findings of the Elmsworth audit. It was unprecedented, and yet it passed unanimously. Isaiah sat at the back of the room, watching the vote unfold. No speech, no media, just quiet presence. Because this wasn't his victory. It was a crack in the armor of silence that had protected misconduct for decades. And across the state, officers from precincts he'd never visited began reviewing their body cam policies. Some did it out of fear. But others, they did it because Isaiah had reminded them what their oath actually meant. Not power, not pride, but the simple promise to serve and to see. One night, just past 11 p.m., Greg responded to a disturbance call outside a grocery store. A young black teenager, hoodie up, hands trembling, stood near a busted bike. The store owner yelled, "He's loitering," probably scoping the place. Greg approached. He saw fear, not defiance, in the kid's eyes. For he might have cuffed him first. Question later. But tonight he crouched down. "What's going on, son?" the boy whispered. "My chain broke. I was just waiting for my brother to pick me up." Greg looked at the torn sneaker laces holding the chain together. Real, honest, harmless. He stood and faced the store owner. "He's not a threat. He's a child." The man scoffed. Greg didn't argue. He just turned back to the teen. "Come on, I'll wait with you." Later that night, Isaiah got a message. It was from Greg. Just 3 words. "You were right." That spring, the police academy held its largest graduating class in years. Isaiah was asked to speak not about policy, but legacy. He stood before rows of fresh faces, uniforms, still crisp ambition burning in their eyes. "I'm not here to give you rules," he began. "You already studied those. I'm here to remind you that every decision you make shapes a story someone else's." He paused. "I was once arrested for looking like someone else's suspicion. That story could have ended there, but I chose to write a new ending." He pointed to the badge on their uniforms. "This isn't armor, it's ink. Every time you use it, you are writing the future of your community." The crowd didn't cheer. They listened. And when Isaiah stepped down, dozens of cadets shook his hand, not for fame, but for truth. Because that day they weren't applauding a speaker. They were welcoming a standard. Weeks later, Dana applied for reassignment, not because she was punished, but because she chose it. She requested community relations. She wanted to meet people, not at the scene of a crime, but in schools, libraries, and churches. Her first assignment was a youth mentorship program. When she walked into the room of teens, they looked at her badge with suspicion. But Dana didn't talk about law. She talked about mistakes, about fear, about how easy it is to follow bad habits dressed as orders. And then she said something that silenced the room. "You don't owe me trust. I have to earn it." One boy raised his hand. "What made you change?" Dana smiled softly. "Someone showed me who I didn't want to become." And for the first time, her badge didn't feel like a wall. It felt like a key. 6 months later, Isaiah returned to the same bench where it all started, outside the bakery, holding a bag of croissants. But this time, no one looked twice. No one questioned why he was there. No squad car slowed down. He watched the city hum with life, imperfect, yes, but awakening. A young officer walked by and stopped. "Sir, are you Mr. Bell?" Isaiah nodded. The officer smiled. "We read your case at the academy. You changed the way I want to do this job." Isaiah didn't say much, just smiled and handed the officer a croissant. "Don't forget why you wear that badge," he said. And in that small, quiet exchange, legacy passed without ceremony. At the next state law enforcement conference, Isaiah was honored with a simple plaque for reminding us who we are. He stood before leaders, officers, citizens, some who once doubted him, others who still wrestled with his message. But he didn't speak to power. He spoke to potential. We can't erase the past, he said, but we can stop repeating it. He paused. And if a single act of decency can echo louder than a decade of silence, then we owe it to every uniform, every citizen, and every child watching us to choose better. No applause followed, only standing silence. Because Isaiah Bell didn't come to win. He came to heal what was broken and build what should have always been. 2 months after the conference, Isaiah received a letter. It was handwritten, neat, folded with care. It came from a man named Harold Banks, a retired officer from a town Isaiah had never heard of. I was everything wrong with the system, it began. I judged people by the neighborhood they lived, in the hoodie they wore, the tone of their voice. I dismissed complaints, covered for colleagues, and laughed at internal reviews. Isaiah paused reading. Then the letter continued. But after watching your hearing, I couldn't sleep. Not out of guilt, but grief. I raised 2 sons, and I realized I policed other fathers like they'd never be good enough for mine. Isaiah's eyes burned. The letter closed with a final line: I hope your courage finds more ears. Because it found mine. Sometimes justice isn't a gavel or a policy. Sometimes it's a single man unlearning everything he thought made him strong. Isaiah crossed a quiet intersection in Elmsworth when a woman called out, "Mr. Bell." She was elderly, wearing a faded sun hat, holding a canvas bag of groceries. "You don't know me," she said, "but I watched the hearing, and I just wanted to say thank you." Isaiah smiled gently. "You're very kind." She held up a trembling hand. "No, listen. My grandson, he's 17. He got stopped last year. Nothing happened, but I saw the way he looked at himself afterward, like he didn't belong." She paused, voice cracking. "After your story, he stood taller, started reading about the law. He wants to study criminal justice now." Isaiah was speechless. "I just wanted you to know," she said, touching his arm softly, "that what you did, it matters more than you'll ever see." In that moment, the crosswalk beeped green. But Isaiah stood still, because sometimes a stranger's words weigh more than any verdict ever could. Isaiah was invited to speak at a university, his alma mater, the same campus where years ago he was detained by campus police for matching a description. Now he stood on that same stage surrounded by students. "Power isn't just about who holds the badge," he said. "It's about who holds the truth and refuses to let it rot in silence." A young man raised his hand. "What if people don't listen?" Isaiah looked out at the crowd, his gaze soft but steady. "Then you speak anyway. Because silence never protected anyone. And your voice might be the rope someone else is hanging on to." The students leaned in, not just to hear, to feel. Because Isaiah didn't just talk like a man who survived injustice. He spoke like someone who believed the next generation could end it. One rainy morning, Isaiah walked through the neighborhood where he was once arrested. Same sidewalk, same corner store. But everything felt different. The clerk greeted him by name. A child waved as she walked to school. A patrol car passed and nodded. He wasn't afraid anymore, because he wasn't just a man revisiting a memory. He was proof that transformation wasn't a myth. He looked up at the gray sky raindrops, tapping his glasses, and smiled. What once broke him had become the very ground on which he stood taller. No sirens, no protests, just peace. And for a man who once walked those streets in shame, this quiet was the loudest justice of all. Years later, Isaiah's name appeared in textbooks, not as a victim, but as a catalyst. His testimony was taught in law schools, his reform work modeled by new precincts. But more than that, his story lived in small moments. In an officer choosing empathy before escalation, in a young man daring to believe he mattered, in a department chief admitting she still had more to learn. Greg, now retired, sat on a bench outside a community center bearing Isaiah's name. He looked up at the inscription above the door. "Justice isn't loud, it's consistent." He smiled to himself, because Isaiah Bell didn't set out to become a symbol. He just refused to be silent. And in doing so, he gave voice to everyone who'd ever been told to stay quiet. That was his legacy. Not anger, not revenge, but a reminder that truth, when held long enough, becomes light. True power isn't loud, it's principled. Isaiah Bell didn't fight back with fists or fury. He faced injustice with truth, patience, and unwavering dignity. In doing so, he reminded us that change isn't born in chaos, it grows in courage. Even one quiet voice can echo across a system if it refuses to be silenced.